because that is critical regardless, again, of what boat you're rowing in, what size boat, 8 people, 4 people, 2 people, or just yourself. The more you focus on each stroke going down that race course, the more effective of a race you're going to have overall. You're not going to run into buoys. You're going to be focused on your breathing. You're going to be staying on the stroke rating that you need to be at. You're going to be focused on your race plan that's going on, but have that flexibility to counter move if necessary. Because there were certainly in team boats where I would be coming down a course and we would be very close. So that's times like those you need to have someone in the boat who can quickly make an adjustment to the race plan. Say, let's take a focus 20 and we'll focus on legs, the drive of the legs going down to help sort of push us ahead a little bit more without completely emptying the tank, meaning using up all of our energy.
Absolutely. And also, just to kind of go back over everything and recap, and I do apologize. It seemed to be a system error with the Wi-Fi, so it cut off a few of our early questions, but I have everything adjusted now, so we're good to go. And I feel like we got pretty much everything that we needed as far as the early questions. I just wanted to apologize about that. So once we replay the video, it may cut off some of the earlier questions, but we're good, and we're about to get into the meat and potatoes coming up as well.
Okay.
Um, and just kind of to piggyback off that, so with rowing, what I didn't know just from your explanation, there's a lot more mental that goes into it than just the physical part of just rowing a boat, which is what most people think of anyway. That is a lot of thinking that you have to do.
It's a highly organized, yes. A lot of acute motor skills that are required. Yes, your legs and your lower back and your glutes are the predominant source of power, but at the same time, when inserting an pulling out the oars from the water, you need to actually have sort of a surgical, acute motor skill, particularly if you're using 2 oars, which is shown here, which is called sculling as opposed to 1 oar. I have more experience with sculling than I do sweep rowing. But yeah, there's a lot going on all at the same time. And I'll be honest, aside from the water, I think that's probably part of what attracted me to the sport. It was the most challenging I had ever done. Not that I've done every sport. I didn't participate in competitive swimming, but from just having the wide range that I did, this was by far more difficult than track for sure.
Oh wow, yeah. I can I can only imagine
A
because
little bit more challenging than a 4x400,
yeah,
or the hurdles, or it's just, yeah, it was a lot more challenging. So I know that that's also what sort of drove me to wanting to understand it, because before you can even start to compete, you need to understand the physics of how to move a boat.
hmm
And then most people also don't know that rowing is both endurance but also power, because during the first part of the 2,000 meters, you're using power to get out of that gate, maybe the first 20 strokes, and then you're settling down to sort of a lower cadence, lower stroke rating, but you're going to hold that stroke rating for a long period of time, um, close to 1,000 meters before you finish, and then you increase the stroke rating. So it is both a power and endurance sport as well. And from the training that we did, I mean, we did do a wide range of endurance as well as powerlifting. The winter months will be heavy lifting, doing pyramids, for example, starting at 2 reps and then going up to 12 reps and then going back down to 2 reps again. In any type of activity, whether it's doing cleans, whether it's doing leg presses, any rowing specific weightlifting activity, we would do a lot of heavy lifting in the winter months to create that power. But then again, it was always backed off by doing a lot of endurance as well. I mean, we were known for doing swimming if it was included. Of course, rowing on those rowing machines. There were prescribed workouts that were endurance specific with the sole purpose of building our capillaries so that our capillaries could then carry oxygen through our bodies more effectively. If that makes any sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like all in one. I mean, the only thing you're not doing is like fighting. You're not punching people. It's not like boxing or, you know. So it's a challenging sport.
Yeah, and also just kind of a quick recap for those that's going to be tuning into the interview. They may have not gotten those early questions. We discussed how it was growing up in Pittsburgh during, I feel like, the golden era of the Super Bowl winning Pittsburgh Steelers, and also the Pirates winning the World Series. And then we got into the subject of you were a all around athlete, track, basketball, volleyball, and softball. But what you favored the most outside of your teddy bear was dancing.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that I tell everyone, if anyone has younger children, boys or girls, just try to put them in a couple dancing classes. Primarily, it was ballet that really gave me that sense of balance. You know, my poor mother had loved watching Audrey Hepburn and any dancers from back in the time that she was growing up. And, you know, she might have had these ideas that, oh, you know, I've got a child that can be a ballerina, but I got too big and too tall for that. But there is something to be said about having that core, that balance, the ability to balance. And Lynn Swan, like I said earlier, was an example of that. Boy, could he jump!
Oh man, what a perfect name to have and to be
Hmm.
a dancer at the same time, Lynn Swan.
Hmm.
That's the perfect ballet name for any type of any type of athlete or dancer.
Right. I mean, think about the agility and the height that's required and the ability to jump for basketball players.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are no basketball players that are ever taking dance classes in the men's division. The women, yes, maybe. Um, I would certainly encourage it. But you think about what it takes to be agile and lift your body up to the where suspend it and then somehow aim and get that ball in there or be able to pass it to someone. You know, there's, I think dancing would really help with basketball players as well as volleyball players. You know, it just lends itself to so many sports. I just can't talk enough about it.
Yeah, and I hear so many football players say they've taken ballet dances in all season, and I agree with you. NBA players, not even NBA, if you're taking up basketball in general, I think dancing will help with agility, especially how they're jumping off their feet so many times and so quickly. I think it would help out tremendously, and that's probably some good advice I'm going to share in some of these AU camps.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and like I said, children, we all went through growth spurts. I went through another one in college, and it wasn't the freshman 15 from drinking. I
Hmm.
grew yet again, and then finally filled out. But you know that again, that dancing that really cemented how I was going to be able to handle my body throughout my life, whether it's in sports, whether it's public speaking. You know that dancing really has helped out.
And again, guys, we are here with Beth Gardner, author of One Rowing Stroke at a Time, National Rower, and also cancer survivor, which we're going to get into that momentarily. Um, let's talk. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and get right into it. You're in the best shape of your life, Olympic caliber athlete. On November 7th, you suddenly get that call that changed a lot for you, of course. Can you describe what was going through your mind after that phone call with Penn Hospital?
Well, for starters, I was, if I can give you just a visual, I was heading to work. I was driving through North Philadelphia on North 611, and I hadn't quite reached Albert Einstein Hospital. And anyone in the Philadelphia area that's going to hear this will understand what I'm talking about. So I'm in the left hand lane. I'm in my Volkswagen Fox. I've got my Starbucks mug, silver mug in hand. The phone's sitting down, and I've got a stick shift, and the phone rings. So I put the Starbucks mug down and I pick it up and I said, hello. I didn't even get a chance to see who it was because again, I'm driving and I'm trying to get to work. It's early morning rush hour in North Philly. So it was my surgeon, and she told me right then and there from the needle biopsy that she had done, just a couple of days earlier, that it was indeed cancer. And immediately she wanted to schedule for me to come into the hospital to, discuss the treatment options, which all again took place at Pennsylvania Hospital, which is located in Old City, Philadelphia. So I got the news, and this is when, like, being a lifelong athlete, whether you're excelling or not, just having the experience of being an athlete and again a dancer really helped me out because I'm on the phone, I've got a stick shift, I'm in rush hour traffic, and again I'm in not so safe of an area. So all of a sudden now I need to switch to the right lane and then head over to the Sunoco that I can just see down the way safely so that I can catch my breath. Right. And I do remember the moment she said it, I did snicker. I had sort of a shock laugh that came out of me. And
Hmm.
I said, okay, I'll call you back. I'm on the road. Let me get over. But I remember hanging up the phone and then literally, I mean, it's rush hour. We're in North Philly. Your windows are up and your doors are locked and you need to get over. So thank God I had all that rowing background where you have that acute motor skills. I was able to shift and head over to the right lane. And then there was a Sunoco, thank God, down the way. And I got to the Sunoco and I pulled over and I just parked and I just sort of collected myself. Like, did I just hear what I heard? Okay, who do I call? Oh my gosh, I have to go to work. I can't be late to work. So what I did was I ended up first thing calling my mother because she knew I had the needle biopsy, and I told her what it had gone on, and I said, I'm going to have to make an appointment. I'm going to have to call her back to make the appointment so I can go in there and discuss the options. But I don't want to go in there alone simply because she's a nurse and has been all of her life, so she had the medical terminology, right?
Hmm.
So I needed somebody with experience in medicine to sort of sit with me and discuss it because I didn't know what I was going to be told. So long story short, I ended up getting to my office and I scheduled the meeting and I made it late enough so that my mother could sort of fly in, and we sat with the surgeon and discussed the surgical options. I ended up having a lumpectomy and then followed that with 2 rounds of chemotherapy, which was a total of 12 rounds, and then just 1 round of radiation, which was just 6. The radiation was very easy for me, but sort of that's basically what happened. And I was very careful with who I told. I know I was, again, it's being an athlete and being used to having to compete at an extremely intense level that really paid off because my intuition, the athlete from within, had kicked in. I'm like, well, I don't want to tell everyone about this because I don't want to cause an alarm, an uproar. But it was shocking. And the other thing about it was I was literally training for the Philadelphia Marathon and had been since I had retired from the sport of rowing. I literally retired from the sport of rowing a year earlier. And by that point, when I got the call from the surgeon, I was running up to 15 miles comfortably, right?
Wow.
So the idea of reaching that 26-mile mark was doable. I knew I was going to hit this sort of marathon wall that they all talk about, but I was willing to deal with that. But I had trained my body to run the 15 miles, which was a lot for someone like myself who's in the Clydesdale range. Rowers tend to be larger in the heavyweight division, tend to be larger boned, bigger people. So we're not naturally inclined to run particularly long distance. We're not genetically predisposed for it. So I'm just amazed I was able to get to that mileage level of 15 miles running, not even knowing that there was this 2.8 centimeter tumor inside of me.
No.
So that kind of shows you what the human mind can do, right?
Absolutely.
Particularly if you've spent, your entire life involved in sports, and then you trained intensely for 5 years after graduating, university and you trained with, a Ukrainian national team coach, and then trained with a U.S. national team coach who had, fought in the Vietnam War, had been put in special assignment, um, you know, top level coaches. Was blessed to have been coached at that level because that prepared me for dealing with this.
Wow. I, and I know I mentioned it when we were talking, kind of back and forth through the emails, that my breast cancer is something that runs heavily through my family. My mother had it, my grandmother had it, a couple of my aunts had it, and just watching them battle, it's something. But they would tell us all the time wouldn't be able to get through it without the help of the family. Can you talk about some of the family members who were there for you, and especially, just any type of family or friends that help you get through that time when you was diagnosed with breast cancer?
Sure. Well, one thing I know, which I'm sure your family know, and you probably know as well, and it's written in the Old Testament, so the Torah, and it's written in the New Testament, that God will strategically put into your life people that people to direct you in your specific path in life at the right time. So with that being said, I've had like a handful or more of people that had already strategically been put in my life, some of which were from the rowing community, a couple years earlier. And I thought the coincidence was that I had met these extraordinary individuals who were, had been involved in the sport of rowing and then moved on and got married and had successful careers. I thought that rowing was really just sort of what brought us together, and that was the purpose. I had no idea that I would be diagnosed with something that's non hereditary because it doesn't run in our DNA,
Hmm.
which was another thing that threw me off. So there were two Jessicas that I had met. One was at Drexel University, who had participated in the sport of rowing as well at Drexel and then afterwards. And then the other Jessica I'd met along Boathouse Row. So they were both from essentially the rowing community. Jessica, I don't want to get them mixed up. Jessica Cardwell was the one I had gone to the university with and rode at Drexel with. She had been working at the time at the University of Pennsylvania at the cancer center, the Abramson Cancer Center. So
Hmm.
she already knew who the top surgeon and oncologists were. And when I say top, my surgeon at the time was ranked fifth in the United States. Now, keep in mind, I had already started to interview other surgeons in different hospitals in Philadelphia. So, with that being said, I was directed to her, but it wasn't until I literally met that surgeon at the first time that, again, my intuition kicked in, whether it's female, whether it's athletic, and just said, that's the surgeon for you. Regardless of the
Wow.
fact that she was recommended, I had other surgeons recommended. Jessica's recommendation was the one that, like, I knew on a spiritual level, that was the one I was supposed to go with. So she was the one I chose, Dr. Dalia Sadaloff, and then Dr. Bernie Mason was my oncologist, both out of Pennsylvania Hospital, which is located in Old City, Philadelphia. Not to be confused with the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, which is in West Philly, not far from Drexel. So Jessica Cardwell helped me with that. The other Jessica, Jessica Grossnickel, I had met on Boathouse Row in rowing. It was both Jessica and her mother, Susan, that really emotionally supported me during that time. In fact, Susan drove me the day of surgery to drop me off, which was very helpful. My mother had flown into town. My mother at the time was taking care of my special needs older brother, Todd, who had been born with cerebral palsy, had one lung, and a number of other challenges, physical challenges that are all documented in this book. But Susan took the time out of work to drive me and my mother to the hospital. So that she was Jessica, Susan, and then the other Jessica were all instrumental in sort of getting me there, and I do believe it was on a spiritual level that they were the ones that were chosen. And one thing I've also noticed in my own experiences in life is that God will put people in your life for a reason. They're not going to be necessarily from this country. They're not going to be the same religion. They are going to be the people you least expect, but on a spiritual level, they're there for a reason. But you both look like the odd couple. We've got two different people. So I've seen that happen all the time. And I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood community, but we grew up attending a Protestant church. So I was fortunate enough to have both the best of both worlds, exposure to the best of both worlds, being the Old Testament and the New Testament. So what was interesting with all of that then is there was another extended family that originally is from Haldwani in India, East India. And Haldwani is roughly about an hour from New Delhi, just to sort of give you the geographical. But I had met their son, Rajiv, back when I was working at Philly.com. I worked at Philly.com in Philadelphia during the last stretch of my rowing career, because it was sedentary. I was getting involved in the IT industry, but I had met him, and then later on I'd met his family. His parents would come from India and then visit and stay in Philadelphia in his house. And then his younger brother, Vic, would also be there. He was going to Villanova University. So that family ended up becoming my extended family. They were always praying for me. We emotionally there for me, someone I could talk to. I naturally bonded with them on a very deep emotional level and also spiritual level. So that whole Pant is their last name, Pant. Rajiv, Vic, Sheila, and in Muktesh Pant. They were all very instrumental. I know they were put into my life at the perfect time. So they were also people that were extremely and still are a very important part of my life. They're sort of the ride or die type of family. So that was really helpful, because again, my parents were here in Pittsburgh. They were long into their retirement. My mother's was responsible for taking care of my brother. So I really had to become my own CEO, CFO, and COO of that entire experience. And I realized the book is thin, but believe me, it's power packed with basically the methods and what I use to get through it, whether it's strategically, analytically, spiritually, psychologically, everything, the tools I use to actually work my way through it.
Wow, that is a powerful story, and man. Now, of course, I know that you mentioned your brother. Um, how much, just from growing up with him and seeing what he had to go through, how much did that motivate you to beat cancer?
It was everything, literally, because he had always been my hero in life. He was born in 1964 with cerebral palsy, and back then a lot of times those babies would end up going into a home and staying there for the rest of their life. My mother had spent her career as a pediatric nurse, and so she and my father had decided to raise him, just as any other child. So he was born with cerebral palsy. In 1988, he ended up having his left lung collapse. So he only had one right functioning lung, which made him very susceptible to picking up the average cold. He had a nebulizer that he used on a daily basis to help with his breathing. And he also had a number of leg surgeries as an infant and a baby because of his crippled legs that he was born with. He wore a Milwaukee back brace throughout high school. Um, so he had that challenge as well. So he had so many multiple, not just physical challenges, but his IQ was slightly below average. That he watching him go through everyday life, was a constant challenge. So me having a bad day with chemotherapy was like him in everyday life. That was sort of how I ref- reflected on it. I really didn't have anything to complain about because I watched this guy, my brother, grow up with all of these physical and psychological challenges, in addition to all the discrimination that takes place with special needs children and adults. So I had no excuse. I had absolutely no, and he's also the reason why, I pursued rowing at the intensity that I did, was because I knew he would never be able to experience that. So why not vicariously do it with him in mind, with his spirit always in mind. And all of the medals I ended up winning, I ended up giving to him when I moved back to Pittsburgh here. And one of them I actually buried with him in his coffin back in April of 2020 when he suddenly passed. So not due to COVID. So he was the bar. He had set the bar for psychological and physical challenges, and so I really didn't have anything to complain about. It was just a matter of getting through it, figuring out strategically, using that analytical mindset I'd been using to create race plans, right, and strategically create that race plan down that 2,000-meter course. Or I self-funded my way through Drexel University, so that was an analytical plan I had to figure out. So it was sort of like all that worked hand in hand, and all that experience then just paid off with the cancer journey. So I could figure out financially, how was I going to stay afloat? How was I going to organize all of my appointments? How was I going to get my treatment? I got my chemotherapy on Saturdays so I could sleep on the weekend, and then I would work during the day, during the weekday. How was I going to organize all that um, to-do list that I had while dealing with a chemotherapy brain and not having, hair, which was no big deal to me because I'm an athlete and most athletes don't get caught up with hair. We
Hmm.
just don't want it in our face while
Right.
we're doing our thing. That was the only problem I had with hair. Like, I don't want it in my eyes. Um, so yeah, he was and he still is, like, he's still with me in spirit, and he is, what got me through it, because I had no excuse to complain about having a bad day. I just look at him and be like, all right, pull yourself together, you'll be fine, pull through it, you'll be fine. So that, and again, the people that I discussed,
Hmm.
and also friends along Boathouse Row. I strategically chosen to live right along Boathouse Row during that time so that I could see my friends, you know, that wanted to check in. If they wanted to come by the apartment, or I go down to Boathouse Row. So the rowing community in Philadelphia was also an extended family for me to sort of persevere through that journey. And rowers understand rowers. So there's sort of a tough mentality. So that's what I needed.
Yeah, and just from the small conversation we have so far, your story is, from all the athletes I've spoken with, is probably one of the most inspirational stories I've ever come across.
Thank you.
With no problem at all. With getting your book published, I know that there were two individuals who was very incremental with through Amazon Publishing. What would you like to share about those gentlemen that help you get your story out to the people?
Sure. Well, let me preface that I chose the self-publishing simply because I had had the experience when working in the financial industry, um, with CFPs that had wanted to have their own books published. I had already been part of that sort of experience, whether it's from a marketing standpoint or speaking to a self-publisher. I was familiar with it. It was not daunting to me at all. So because I had that experience, I chose Amazon Publishing because I understood how the game worked. And I was fortunate enough. I mean, like I said, God puts people in your lives at a specific time for a reason. And I initially met with Alex Roy in October of 2021. This was after I had decided to pull the manuscript out of the book I'd written between 2001 and 4. I wrote it back then. But again, I followed my intuition that said, you're not going to publish this now. For starters, I hadn't reached remission. I didn't want to jinx myself. And also, I hadn't gained the pearls of wisdom that are included in this book when you're going through this. There's a variety of spiritual pearls of wisdom that I discovered, through the sport of rowing, through having my brother, through the lengthy list of extended family that I mentioned, that I applied in here. And it's not even religion specific. I've taken Native American quotes, I've taken Hindu quotes, I've taken Buddhist quotes, done a wide range of spiritual teachings, and strategically placed them in this book, just like would do a rowing stroke. Everything's very strategically placed. So I met with Alex Roy. I didn't mean to digress, but I met with Alex Roy in October over the phone. And I told him about this project that I had. I said, I finally got a chance to re-edit it. I said, it's been written a long time ago. It's been on the shelf. So we have a pandemic going on. How are people going through the pandemic going to get their treatments, let alone any other medical challenges they have? How are they going to be able to do that, right? That was one of the first things that crossed my mind when we had lockdown here in Pittsburgh, which was the last week in March of 2020. So I sent Alex the manuscript. He had a team of designers. They decided, on how they would design the cover. I quite frankly had wanted a collage of my friends, the extended family, the Pant family, both Jessica's, Boathouse Row, just a nice little collage in front. And then you can just put little me in the back. Because this is not about ego. This is not about me needing my face on the cover book. In fact, it was the last thing I wanted. But they came up with the book design. I don't have an eye for design. I'm not good at interior design. My idea of designing is bringing in a bottle of wine and put it in the wine rock. I have decorated. Like, that's my extent. I don't have a vision for it. So we did that. We talked about all the social media posts that were going to be created and then posted on Facebook. They discussed a website with me as well. And so there were a lot of very clear-cut steps we were going to take in an effort to finally get this thing bound and put on the market, which is on Amazon.com. To bring it all together. And quite frankly, by February, it was on the market, beginning of February.
Wow.
They didn't waste any time. And I have to tell you, I had a great deal of fun with them over the phone. Mike Davidson was the other gentleman that I have been working with and still working with him today from additional sort of global marketing that we're doing. I've been marketing this on a global level because, of course, cancer is non-discriminatory and it affects every corner of the world. So while this is strictly written in English, I don't have any reason why I can't have it transcribed into Spanish, right?
Right.
Particularly in the United States, it's a very common language here. So with that being said, I've had a wonderful experience both with Alex Roy and Mike Davidson and the entire team, so much so that I was baking them cookies and I was shipping them over to their office in Los Angeles routinely. Like, you out of cookies? Okay, I'm going to make more cookies. I'm sending them over. I sent them over Sarah's Candy. Sarah's Candies here in Pittsburgh are well known. I've teamed up with them in certain books that I've mailed to certain public figures. So I've been sending them a number of well-known Pittsburgh items over to them. But they did an outstanding job. They were very clear on the editing that needed to be done. Before anything went to print, I got to see it all. So it was crystal clear to make sure everything was spot on. It was a wonderful time. I'm still in contact with them. And I feel very grateful to have met with him. And it's been an actual fun journey. I mean, there are times that Alex and I have laughed so hard that we couldn't breathe, um, and we couldn't speak. You know, it's that type of fun team atmosphere. I really enjoyed that team. So, highly recommend them.
Absolutely. And again, if anyone missed it at the very beginning, all of our interviews, especially our Player Spotlight Women's Edition, is presented by Rebecca Williams, your neighborhood energy guide. Allow Rebecca to be your sunshine in the rain by contacting her either by cell or by text at 864-607-9765 and use the promo code sports and culture. And to end everything off, if they missed it, Beth, if you can let everybody know where they can get your book, um, whether that's on Amazon or any other places that it may be located.
Sure. So it is on Amazon. .com, and then you'll just type in One Rowing Stroke and it will pop up. No one else has that title for the book category. So you will find it there. You can buy it either by, I've only done paperback and I've done ebook. I'm not doing a hard copy. It doesn't look like much of a book, again, because it's thin, but it's power packed with information. It is a page turner. You're going to get words of wisdom with every paragraph. So that's the significance of this book. I also didn't want to make anything too large because I know from having lived in Philadelphia and taken the above and below trains as well as in New York that, it's nice to have something to read when you're on the train. So that's also my target. People that are doing commuting and not driving, particularly with these gas prices.
Yeah,
So that was part of the reason why I made it kind of tiny, is so that people can put it in their purse or put it in their briefcase and take it with them.
extremely strategic, if you ask me.
I've
Very
read a few books in my time.
well. Again, guys, Beth, thank you so much. Again, I apologize for the very beginning of the interview. Thank you for just staying with me on that. Thank
That's
you
all
for
right.
coming on. This was a great conversation. I learned so much today, and now I'm gonna go and YouTube some rowing sessions because I'm focused. I want to see it. Everything that you talked about, I want to visualize it while I'm watching these clips tonight.
It's by far the hardest sport I've ever tried. Um, so on all levels. So yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. My name is Tyler Butler. This has been another Player Spotlight interview. Thank you again.
Take care.
All right. So